Really?
Push me out of the way.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. You're not kidding with this traffic, man. It took forever to get here. All right, sit down, Dan.
I'm gonna stand up and dance.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. The first two, well, first of all, I want to thank John for doing the introduction of Dan, and I want to thank Dan for doing the introduction of me. I don't know where you guys are, but I really appreciate it. Sometimes we just come out and start playing, and there's no introduction, so I do appreciate that. And I'm really happy that my good friend, Bill O'Connell, hooked this up for me, as he did last year. Bill and I, let's hear it for Bill. I came to New York about in summer of 1974. I don't know exactly when Bill came, but we were playing all the same $25 gigs, you know. The Surf Maid, which is a great place on Bleecker Street. It was a piano bar, gigantic, big white piano bar. It was a horrible piano. It was a duo gig, and it was from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. for about $25, and you know, maybe a drink or something. But everybody played it, and Bill and I became friends, and I've always related to him. We kind of simpatico musically and personally. So I'm really happy that he thought of me for this gig and for last year out in Montauk. So I really appreciate it. And what a great scene you guys have going out here to have this jazz thing. So I'm really digging it. All right, now let me talk about myself. That's enough about your hip shit. So yeah, they told you a little bit about me. I'm a jazz pianist. I've been around a long time. I'm old as hell, you know. I went on the road when I was 20 years old with Cal Jader, who was a great jazz vibist who I loved. And he did Latin jazz, and I played with Ayrton Morero and Flora Purim for a year. And then when I was 22 years old, I got the gig of my dreams, which is being the pianist with Cannonball Adderley's band. And, you know, Cannonball was my idol. And when I was a kid, I heard him in high school. You know, I was in the South when I was little, but when I was 9 years old, we moved to Berkeley, California. And I went to the Berkeley Jazz Festival when I was about 16. I went with my high school girlfriend, Michelle. And we were listening, and there was Cannonball Adderley. And I couldn't believe it. And I said to her, God, if only I could get to play in that band. And she said, don't worry, Mike, one day you will. So you can imagine how exciting it was when I was 22. We came back to that very place, to that Greek theater, and I got to play in the band with Cannonball. And I remember I was so excited, and after the gig, I went backstage and I said, gee, Cannonball, if only I could get back with Michelle. And he said, you're on your own with that, man. But I wanted to read, I did write this book. I wrote a memoir that came out about a year ago called On That Note, a memoir of jazz, tics, and survival. Jazz is obvious. I'm going to be talking about that. I play jazz. Tics because I have Tourette's syndrome. I don't know if you know what tics are. You might be seeing them while I'm up here. If I go like that, it's not a tic, okay? I don't have coprolalia. If I say fuck you, it's not a tic. But I can get away with it because of Tourette's syndrome. So it's really, really handy. And survival because I had a really untreatable rare cancer about 9 years ago, and I was treated for a long time for the wrong thing. And luckily, I survived this thing, but it was bad. So I was sick for about 4 years. I was in bed for 8 months. You know, man, I wouldn't wish it on Trump. You know, that's how bad it was. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. You know, but so I was happy to write this book. You know, I just sat down while I was sick, and I thought I got to write about, you know, my life, deal with my life. You know, so I'm going to read just a little bit from the book because I know that can be a drag. But I'm going to read. Here's the book, by the way, and it's for sale here. On that note, it's a cool picture of me with glasses, and there's a little keyboard in the glasses, which is really hip. I didn't design it, but it was really cool. And it's for sale somewhere around here. I don't know. They're like $20. One for, yeah, back there. One for 20, two for 50. So it's a really good deal. Let's see. So this is a little thing that happened. You know, I was with Cannonball in 1975, and we were touring around as jazz musicians did in those days. And we flew in from Seattle. We flew in from Seattle on our day off, and we went to Vancouver, Canada, to play. And there was a really, no, it's Montreal. We went to Montreal, and Montreal had an old town. They had a really cool jazz club there. and actually, an album just came out called Live in Montreal in 1975 that we did. So we flew in there, and around noon, we got ready to head over to the club to set up, perform a sound check, and rehearse a little. Cannon, Roy, our drummer, and I went down and loaded Cannon saxes and my electronic effects anvil case into the trunk of one of the cars. And just as we were getting in, we heard the squeal of tires. We were suddenly surrounded by cars that had come from all directions. A bunch of cops in blue uniforms jumped out of them with their guns drawn and pointed at our heads. Screaming into our stunned faces in French, because it was Montreal, they threw us up against our car and handcuffed our wrists behind our backs. Whatever the hell they thought we'd done, these dudes weren't fucking around. They meant business. As we stole glances at one another, our eyes as big as saucers, the manager of the hotel came out. This'll clear things up, I thought, but no. Yeah, I'm glad you got these guys, he said. I knew they were up to no good. That's the Hilton for you. We had no idea what was happening, but figured we better stay quiet and go along with them. They put Cannonball into the back of one car and threw Roy and me together in the back of another, screaming the whole time and pushing our heads down. So we ended up sitting on the floor of the back seat, and I guess they didn't want us to see where we were going. Then off we went at breakneck speed, silent and separated by a metal grill from the guys in the front seat. Eventually, we arrived at what looked like a police station and were yanked out and shoved inside into some sort of admitting area. Hey, can we get a phone call? I managed to squeak out. This isn't America, one of the cops growled at me. You do not get a phone call. Shit. They patted us down and took everything from our pockets, cash, wallets, keys, the works. Then they took us in different directions. I was taken into the back and treated to that routine you see on TV, a strip search, which included a careful look up my butt by some skeezy dude. Once I was dressed to get him back in handcuffs, I told the guy I had to pee. With an eye roll that said, "This is your last fucking strike," he uncuffed me again. Took me down the hall and waited outside where I used the bathroom. Then it was back in the cuffs and back to the waiting room. After a while, a different guy came in. This one could speak English, and he explained that he was a Royal Canadian Mountie. Apparently, some guys had robbed a bank in the vicinity of our hotel, and we were the prime suspects because those guys who robbed it were black. I explained that it was all a big mix-up. We were musicians with a gig at a nearby club. He listened quietly. Then he referred to the $586 he confiscated from my pocket. He asked me where I'd gotten so much money, and I said, we've been on the road for 4 weeks. That's the draw I took on my pay, you know, my walking around money. Honestly, man, we're just musicians. We're booked for a week at the club in Old Town, then it's straight back to New York. Seriously, call the club. They'll tell you all about it. He did not respond to anything I said, just peppered me with more questions about where I lived, who the other guys were, stuff like that. After a while, he left, and I sat there for 15 minutes or so until another Mountie came in and told me we were moving. Pushing me in front of him, he took me even further into the bowels of the place, toward a big door that looked like it was airlocked or something. This could not be good, I thought. We were ushered inside the big door by another guy, and I found myself standing in a long hall lined on both sides with jail cells. Worse and worse. The cop took off my handcuffs, put me into a cell by myself, and threw in a brown paper bag after me. Without a word, he slammed the cell door, locked it, and walked away. You know, I had never been in jail or even in custody. The cell had bunk beds with some really uncomfortable-looking green mats on them that resembled AstroTurf. I sat and then reclined on the bottom one. Sure enough, it felt like a bed of nails. I sat back up and examined my surroundings. Everything was gray metal, and the tiny box didn't exactly smell like a garden. On the ceiling, a previous occupant had carved some sort of profanity in French. I had no idea what it meant, but I had an idea. I opened up the brown bag and took out the driest, lamest, stiffest white bread sandwich ever made, filled with a single cardboard hard slice of yellow cheese. I put that shit back in the bag and just sat there hating my life. The way I figured it, Cannonball and Roy were very distinctive-looking guys and would probably be let go. But me, with my crazy brown hair down to here and big furry beard, I looked like every French hippie dude in Montreal, possibly including the bank robbers they were also looking for. These jive French guys could put me in jail for life without so much as a phone call or a good moist sandwich. For 2 hours, I sat in that cell thinking these dark thoughts until yet another blue-uniformed French-speaking dude showed up, unlocked the door, and led me out of there, this time without handcuffs. When we got to the front of the place, I was handed back my stuff and then ushered out to the parking lot. The guy opened the door of a car and gestured for me to get in. Roy was already sitting there, waiting. Once we were shut inside, no handles on our doors, I noticed. 2 cops got in the front and we started driving. Roy and I looked at each other but kept our mouths shut. Where are we going now? After around 20 minutes, I started recognizing things, and finally we pulled into our hotel parking lot. The Mounties opened the doors for us, and once we'd climbed out, those cats just got back in their vehicle and drove off without a word. It had been a good 5 hours since we'd started loading up the car. 5 hours of bullshit. Anyway, Roy and I were so happy to be back in the hotel, we practically held hands and skipped up to our rooms. When we got upstairs, we saw that Cannon's door was open, and he and Walter Booker, our bassist, were hanging out. Cannon was lounging on his bed with a big Buddha smile on his face, a torn brown bag on his lap, eating the fucking cheese sandwich he'd been giving in jail. Not bad, my man, he said, smiling. Not bad. Playing with Cannonball really did mean a lot to me, and I had grown up when I was little in the South. My father was from a little town called Indianola, Mississippi. It has about 6,000 people live there. And of course, when we grew up, when I was there in the 50s, and when he grew up in the, he was born in 1924, it was a totally segregated, racist place. But he loved jazz, and he loved gospel music. So whenever I'd go visit my grandparents, we'd walk around, and there were just churches on Sundays, and there were, white churches and black churches. They're all in the same kind of square. And we just walk around and listen to the music. And that's when I started listening to a lot of gospel music, My mother was from New Orleans, so I got exposed to that music from her. Anyway, when I was with Cannonball's band, we always made sure to play some kind of blues thing in what we did. And I felt like the blues was underneath everything we were doing. And when I play, I feel like that's in my playing. So I wrote this tune, thinking about another little town where my uncles, I had 3 uncles. We were Jewish, right? Sidney, Sally, Muchie, Wolff. And they lived in Leland, Mississippi, even smaller town, like 4,000 people. They had a little dry goods store, And I wrote this tune just thinking about the South, thinking about listening to that gospel music that got into my soul when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, whatever. And also thinking about how, for me to play with Cannonball Adderley, that really worked out. And even now, I feel like that's something that when I'm playing, no matter what kind of music I'm playing, there's a little bit of that I infuse into it. So this is a tune I wrote called Leland. Thank you. So I was told by Bill and John and everybody that the format here is interacting with the audience, conversation. So I don't know the formal way to do it is say, does anybody have anything to say? Anybody want to talk? Any questions, comments? Yeah. Do I ever play the keyboard as opposed to the piano? I mean, like a synthesizer or organ or something like that? Yes, I definitely do. When I started out in the 70s, you know, fusion music was really happening. So when I was about 18 years old, in 1970, I went to Fullerton, California, to the original Fender Rhodes electric piano factory and bought one from that guy, whatever his name was. And he was there, and so I had a really heavy electric piano. It was, you know, a big, what you call a suitcase piano, so it had these gigantic speakers, and then a big keyboard. It must, I don't know how much it weighed. It was a nightmare. And then I bought anvil cases, which were these gigantic cases, and I put that in there, and we put it on the plane, and, you know, I saw it fall out of a plane. You know, it was really heavy. But, you know, it was very strong. But I remember when I was with Cannonball's band, we once played at this place called Just Jazz in Philadelphia, and it was like steps going up like that to the club. And I asked the band guys, hey, could you guys help me with the Rhodes? They go, no, that's your axe, man. We're not asking you to help with ours. I go, yeah, but you're like a little saxophone or something. How to get somebody from the club. And then to go down the stairs, I put it in my anvil case and just go. But then I also got into synthesizers and stuff like that. But I don't really, you know, I have a studio where I compose, and I compose a lot of music, and I also do tracks for people. And in the studio, I have a complete setup with a, you know, a Mac computer, a controller keyboard, and everything now is there. You know, samples, you can have samples of Fender Rhodes, you can have any sounds. And I do film scores that way too. So yeah, keyboards is, I love playing keyboards. I love playing Fender Rhodes. And I have an album coming out August 2nd on Sunnyside Records called Memoir. And I do play electric piano on a couple of the tunes there. And it just brought me back because they had a really nice electric piano. I don't even own one anymore, man. Mine was just destroyed by all those times. But playing it in the studio was really, it's a wholly different feeling to play an electric piano, as you know, any pianist Bill knows, I'm sure. So that was a cool question.
Can I ask you a question about Cannonball?
Yeah?
Did you spend as much time as I would have to ask him about the late 50s?
About what?
About the late 50s and Coltrane and...
Oh, did I ask him about the late 50s and Coltrane?
And Miles Davis, the whole kind of blue.
What?
Kind of blue.
No, you know, I was going to get into it a little later. I became friends before I was with Cannonball with Bill Evans, a great pianist. And yeah, is that for my friendship? Thank you. I am good with people. So I had asked him a lot about Kind of Blue. To be honest, you know, I tell this, you know, I teach at NYU, you know, and I teach in the jazz department. I have all these students. And they sort of idolize all these people, and they have this, you know, a certain approach to music. But our approach was not that approach like it is now. It wasn't academic. It was really being in the moment. And so when I was with Cannonball, when I was, you know, I was with a lot of great people, Sonny Rollins, you know, Nancy Wilson, whatever. We never, ever, ever talked about harmony or music or did you do this with that guy. We just talked about, do we think what we're doing is getting over with the audience? How do we feel that? How's our compositions, you know? And I do remember when I joined Cannonball, I had just been in New York a little while. When I came to New York from California, everybody was playing these really, you know, demanding harmonic Coltrane tunes. One called Giant Steps, right? It has a lot of chords. I'll just quickly play it for you. Stop. Stay. So yeah, I didn't know it. It was like... Tune, and then another tune called Moment's Notice by Coltrane. worked day and night on those 2 tunes because, man, I didn't know anything about that. So when I got with Cannonball, I said, hey, Cannonball, man, could we play, Moment's Notice or Giant Steps? And he said, Mike, we don't play exercises in our band. He said, Coltrane was my favorite saxophonist, but those were his exercises. Why don't you write me some music? So I began writing for Cannonball right away. And he died before we got to record it, but I was writing a lot, and we were playing a lot of my music. So, their attitude was, a couple of things I heard from Nat Adderley, his brother, who was a trumpet player, who said, one thing to remember, you could never write out jazz the way it sounds. It's always an approximation.
What do you think of Thelonious?
What I think of Thelonious Monk? Well, I got to see him live also at the Berkeley Jazz Festival. I have Tourette's syndrome, and I didn't know what I had at that time, lots of ticking. And when I saw him, I could feel the feelings that he had, because that was probably the best thing he had. He had a lot of mental problems, But I could feel his energy. He would stand up, and when he was playing, and then he'd turn around in a circle, and he'd do all kind of stuff, right? But I dug him. I mean, I dug the music, But I was inspired by the music, and I think music really comes out of people, comes out of who you are. But when I saw him on that gig, he played a couple of tunes, and then he played a solo, and he crawled like this, and he followed his hand, and he walked off the stage, man. And I went, I like it. I like that guy. Somebody else had another question. Yeah, in the back.
You have a band in the last, 10 years with Michael Clark.
Yeah.
And with Haley.
Yeah, and Haley and I Swanger. Yeah, we had a band called the Wolff and Clark Expedition with this great drummer, Mike Clark, who I knew from the Bay Area, but he got famous playing with Herbie Hancock. And there was a young woman that I was playing with, a saxophonist named Haley Niswanger, who's really great. I mean, that's not my band now. Now I have a jazz trio, and, I play with various groups, but my main, I mainly have a trio. I was just in Europe, and I have a trio over there. I have a bass player and drummer that live in Paris, and then we tour with them. Okay, let's do a little more music. I don't want to run out of all the questions now. Let me see how we're doing on time. I think we're spending a lot of time. Oh, God, it's going quick. Okay. So, okay, I'm going to, let me do this. Since if this will hold up. Since we're kind of in this mode of talking, I mentioned Bill Evans. Oh, man. I was going to read this part from it, but I'll just tell you this story because I don't know if I can find it in the book. But when I was with Cal Jader, I was 20, and I wasn't old enough to go in the club. So when I ran into Cal Jader when I was 19 years old, and I had a job in Berkeley at Fantasy Records, writing out lead sheets for rock and roll bands like Creedence Clearwater that couldn't write out their music, and they needed to do that in order to copyright. You don't need to do that anymore. Now you can just sit in a digital format of some kind. But then you needed to have it written out, so I was writing it out, and the guy looked at it and said, "Man, you wrote too many notes. Just write 8 notes." I said, "Well, they're not playing 8 notes, man." He said, "You're fired." So I walked through Fantasy Records and I saw Cal Jader, and that's how I met him. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I was young, I thought they were all lucky to have me. I didn't, it wasn't like, oh, it's an honor to play with you. I felt, fuck them. They're lucky they got a young guy like me that's got a wah-wah pedal and a Fender Rose, That was really my attitude, That's the young person's attitude. And I grew later to understand the people I was playing with. But at the time, I really felt their peer. I didn't feel, but that's how I was. So I went up to Cal Jader and said, "Hey, I'm Mike Wolff. I'm ready to play in your band." Just like that. And he went, well, I'm going to be playing at El Matador in San Francisco. Why don't you come? And then it was about 3 months later, and I tried to get in, but I couldn't get in because I wasn't 21. So I went every night, and then the last night, this really nice waitress snuck me in, and I sat in with him and got the gig. But when I got the gig, I was 20. And in California, well, a lot of places were very strict. So I had to be like 10 feet away from the bar, So I'd be sitting by myself at a table reading, Grout's History of Music or something. And these guys would be hitting on chicks and drinking and having a blast. And I was, okay, I'm just going to sit here. But we would often play these clubs. There was like a circuit, you know, of all these different clubs all over the United States and in Europe and Japan. And so you'd see everybody at jazz festivals or whatever. And I'd constantly, our band would come before or after Bill Evans' trio. So I tried to stick around if he was going to be there and I wasn't working, to go hear him, and I would hear him every night. We got to be friends, and when he would come to San Francisco, I would go every single night to every single set. And you know, he didn't really know anybody, so at the end of the night, I had my car, I'd take it and we'd go eat at a place called Pam Pam. And you asked me if I asked him every question you could ask him. Well, what do you play in a C major 7? What do you play that? What was it like playing with Miles? Were the guys nice to you? Blah, blah, blah. You know, I asked him every question. Well, when you play on Emily, well, you know, how you modulate to C, but you know, and he never was problematic. You know, he was always sweet about it to me. And he'd say, oh, Mike, but you can read all those. He was trying to make me feel good. You can read all those different, you know, clefs and all that. I went, I don't know, man. What are you talking about? You know. But anyway, one day I had been, you know, I would just spend the whole day practicing the piano. And one day I was working on this standard called Stella by Starlight, which is a really great tune that Miles Davis, I mean, it was from a movie, but I think Miles really made it famous in the jazz world. And it was hard, and I was having a hard time, you know, so I did it, worked on it, trying to, how am I going to, you know, do this song, man? And I went that night and, you know, heard every set of Bill, you know, it was mind-blowing. I always just felt blown away. We went out to eat, and I said, you know, Bill, can I ask you a question? He goes, yeah, Mike, I'm trying to learn Stella by Starlight, man. What do I do? And he goes, well, I'll tell you the way I learned every one of those, you know, American songbook standards, you know, Cole Porter and Rodgers and Hart, all that. He says, I play the melody in the right hand, and I play the root of the chord in the left hand, and I just play 2 notes inside, inner voices they're called, just like a Bach chorale. So melody, you know. Then he would play the root, which is the, you know, the root of the chord, like. You know, so he said, then he put in those inner voices. So when I went home that night, which was already about 2 or 3 in the morning, I stayed up all night. I thought, okay. He didn't tell me what those notes were in the middle, but I thought they're probably part of the chord, the third, you know, if you're playing a chord, it's 1, 3, 5, flat 5, 7. You wouldn't have to get too technical, but anyway, it's 2 notes that you would play. So I tried it. So that gave me a way to start it. And then I just started, I took off from there. I didn't ask him any more questions. I wrote down there's so many ways that I play a song. So I just started, the first thing I started doing was taking those inner notes, but changing them. So instead of doing, I just started making little melodies. Just start moving those little notes around, right, like that. Then I just thought, okay, well, let me start adding more colors, because I have a thing called synesthesia. It kind of goes along with Tourette's, you know, and it means I have colors for everything in my mind, which when I was little, I thought everybody had it for days of the week, months of the year, and numbers, and I have it for notes, you know. And so if I'm playing a song, like an E chord, a minor, half diminished chord, then you can put the ninth on there. Right? 11th, 13th. Right? What's the next one? Anyway, I started adding those and moving those around as if they were an inner voice, so. Just started moving his light like, I know maybe that makes 6 lines are going on at once, So this is a line, the bass, the melody, those little things, and then these things start making a line. So there are all those lines like little spiders, that's how I would think about it. And then I would start, I wrote this all down so I could remember. Oh, a thing that I fell into was thinking, well, if you could play a chord, like let's just say a C minor 7th chord, 1, 3, 5, 7. Maybe you could play another chord with it. So I started taking those colors I was talking about and creating another chord. So if I played a C minor 7, I'd play a D minor 7, which is a step above, and play them together. And if I went to F7, I'd play a G7 on top. So I started mixing, I call it bichordal, 2-chordal, it's what it is. Now, everything intersects that I do. It's, it's like there are different planes of harmony and sounds and everything, but they all kind of intersect. So if I went, so in this one, maybe I'd play an F sharp minor chord, and go to A7 and play an F, a B flat, no, I'll do a D minor 7th on top here. B flat triad over F minor. I have to experiment. I play a lot by ear, so a lot of musicians figure it all out ahead of time, and some things I do, but a lot of what you're hearing, like that second tune I didn't know I didn't know what time it was. I don't know what I'm going to do. I just have these sort of techniques that I use. So then I thought, okay, well, what I was really into when I was young was McCoy Tyner, and he was the piano player who had played with Coltrane, and he played a lot of what you call fourths, intervals. Pentatonics, 5-note scales. It's just a sound. And then I thought, maybe I could add that to it. So I was kind of getting that sound going. And then the one thing I had to always come back to was the blues, right? Nobody ever, I teach in this school at NYU. I've never heard anybody but me talk about the blues. Like, let's play Stella by Starlight and make it bluesy. Just a little taste. Like if Ray Charles played it. So when I actually play a tune, I feel like I have at least, then there's chromatic, you play every note. I feel like I have all that there to play with, and that's what's fun for me, is to say, well, it plays me a little bit, especially playing solo, it's so fun. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't really play solo much. I don't have stuff worked out, you know. I don't have all that. I just kind of play, and then it happens, you know. So let me play just a little more Stella if you're not sick of that song. And see what happens. No, I think I've played everything I could play on it already. Call out what I'm doing, and I'll tell myself what I'm doing. Here's the inner voices. McCoy. Blues. I'm going to go bichordal here. I forgot a whole other thing I do. I study this guy, he's a French composer, Oliver Messiaen. So there's a whole other thing there. But anyway, he has a harmonic concept that I kind of steal. A little bit of McCoy. Bichordal, I'm going to play an A triad over B flat. As Stan Freberg said, ask a simple question, get a pageant. Okay. I'm going to play a ballad that I like. Well, I just kind of played a ballad. Do you guys know Angel Eyes? Angel Eyes. I'll play a little bit of that, you know. I'd say it's really in my solo repertoire, but I'm going to do it. And I arranged this with all these different chords, and I have to look at it because I can't even remember what I did. This is one where I worked it out. So I'll just quickly show you since we're doing this. So the melody, this is the song. All right, so then I just change the chorus. All right. That's the first time I ever went into My Funny Valentine from that tune. See you later. Get a book on the way out, please. It goes towards my kids' education. But you know what? You don't have to get it. Don't worry about it. So any other things you guys want to chat about? We got a little more time. What do you think we kind of covered it? Yes, in the back, yeah?
Yes, I was wondering, did you go to college for music? And if you did, could you tell us how that experience was different than, say, dealing with Tourette's in high school?
Did I go to college for music? And if I did, how did that experience differ from having Tourette's in high school?
Yeah.
Well, that's a compound question. I can dig it. I mean, if you want to talk about Tourette's syndrome, that's a whole other ballgame. You know, I didn't know I had Tourette's syndrome until I was in my late 30s. I didn't know what I had. I just knew I did all this weird stuff. People thought I was a junkie. You know, I was on drugs. That's what a lot of people thought. Everybody was doing cocaine at a certain point. I did not do drugs. I didn't like drugs. I tried them, and it just weren't for me. But yeah, I went to college, but I didn't go to a jazz college because I didn't know there was a jazz college to go to college in 1970. I think there was Berklee School of Music, but I was in California. So I went to UCLA and just studied classical music because that's what was happening. Even though I was into jazz, and we had, another student and I formed a jazz band, a big band. But I actually learned a lot, not about Tourette's, but about sonatas and classical music and stuff like that. But, you know, I wasn't really cut out for that in a way because my concept was so from a jazz point of view because I'd grown up because of my father was an amateur musician. You know, he'd been from Mississippi, he had perfect pitch. So I grew up listening to George Shearing and Count Basie and Ray Charles and you know, Oscar Peterson, stuff like that. You know, that's what I grew up with, Frank Sinatra, you know. But when I got to college, you know, I did learn a lot. I mean, my parents said maybe take classical piano lessons. They said you can't take jazz until you're a teenager. So I took a classical until I was about 14 years old. But privately, you know, I was figuring it out on my own. I had never taken lessons in jazz till I was in high school. But in college, I really did love it. You know, I got to loving that classical music. I had a great teacher who we'd have all the great sonatas of Beethoven and Mozart. We'd looking at the music of it, and he would play it on the piano, and then we would analyze it. And that really got my ear connected to what I was seeing, because I wasn't a great sight reader. I could read music, but it got me better. As far as Tourette's syndrome, that was such a journey. You know, I didn't know what I had. I just knew I did this weird stuff. I told you about Sidney, Sally, and Muchie Wolff in Mississippi. Well, Muchie Wolff probably had Tourette's syndrome. Of course, there was no diagnosis. He did a lot of weird stuff, you know. Shit on that, you know. Did all kind of stuff, you know. Ticks and noises. He was a gambler, a womanizer, you know. He was an ideal uncle for me, you know. I learned everything I know from him, you know. But, so, you know, the Tourette's thing was, I'll just tell you briefly, because I talk a lot about it in the book, but let's put it this way. When I was 4 years old, my father got my grandmother's piano from Louisiana, upright piano, and brought it to our little house in Memphis, and he taught me the St. Louis blues. I say, I had to see, and then the sun go down. He taught me that, right? So then, I was playing the piano and I got really into it, you know, and he would rock me on his rocking chair, man, and he'd be having a cigar and holding his 9-iron, because that's what he was into, and just listening to Count Basie and explaining to me what these guys were doing. And I was imagining, even at that age, that I was hanging out with those guys. And then I thought, wait a minute, George Shearing and Ray Charles are blind? Those are my favorites. How do they do it? How do they get to the piano? I had a million questions, you know. But when I was 6, my mother came into the kitchen and said, do you know what you're doing with your eyes? And I didn't know what I was doing with my eyes. I was rolling them around, I guess, and doing a tick. And I just knew I immediately felt shame. I just knew whatever I was doing, I was a bad person. And that's what I felt. I just felt it. Man, if I just had my shit together, if I was just a good guy, that stuff would go away, you know? And they took me to the pediatrician, who just said, well, it's not getting in his way. I could read. I had friends, you know, don't worry about it. But, you know, I became good friends with a great neurologist who wrote a lot of books named Oliver Sacks. And Oliver, that's the way I found out I had Tourette's. A friend of mine's, sister-in-law, when I was in my late 30s, said, "You got to read this book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and you're going to find out you have Tourette's." I said, "I don't have Tourette's syndrome. Fuck you. What's Tourette's syndrome?" And then I read this book, and it had a guy named Witty Tiki Ray, who was a drummer, and he had Tourette's. And I went, "Oh, this might be what I've had." And then a few years later, I got Bell's palsy, so I went to a neurologist for that. And he goes, "Yeah, it's Bell's palsy. I'll give you this. You'll be okay." And as he's writing the script for the prednisone or whatever, his head is down, and I said, "Hey, by the way, people have said I have Tourette's syndrome." He goes, "Yeah, you got Tourette's syndrome, man." He says, "Is it getting in your way?" I go, "I don't think so." But the energy, what Oliver said to me, Oliver Sacks, it's just about energy. And I would always try so hard. I was the band leader of the Arsenio Hall show, and I would try so hard not to tick on camera. I'd see that camera coming, I go, "God damn it," because I could control it for a minute. Like I could just sit here and not do it, But the minute it went, when I let it go. So, it's an energy thing, man. And when I play the piano, it's pretty relaxing for me. It kind of goes away sometimes, or even if not, I can let the impulses, because it's an impulse, there's an impulse to do these movements or these sounds. I make sounds, and I go like that when I speak, things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, because it's a lifetime of college, what didn't do it, But I know it drew me to jazz, for sure, because I felt like here was a meritocracy that didn't care. There's junkies, all different races of people, whatever. If I could play, I could play. So for me, like, this was heaven. I couldn't imagine being in an office or something. You had a question?
Do you ever enjoy playing with singers?
Say that one more time.
Do you ever enjoy playing with singers?
Playing and singing, yes. I made an... Oh, with singers? Hell no. I thought you were saying playing and singing. I did make a vocal album. Playing with singers, that's how you make your bread and butter when you're young. And I did a thing. There was a time when I was with Nancy Wilson. Of course, when you're with the great singers, like with Flora Purim or Nancy Wilson, or I got to play with Sarah Vaughan or somebody like that, it's fantastic. But let's just say most singers are not fantastic. They don't know what they're doing. There's a joke when the singer goes, "How do we play this tune?" And the piano player goes, "Oh, I got an idea. Let's start in the key of A. And then when you go to the second A section, let's go into 3/4. Then we get to the bridge, go into 7/8, up a half step, and then we come back to the last 8 bars, go into a completely different key." She goes, "How am I going to do that?" He goes, "You did it last night." That's what being a piano player is like with singers, But, if it's a great singer, I liked it. When I was on the Arsenio Hall show, I got to play with, Al Green and Ray Charles and people like that. It was awesome, soulful, Whitney Houston and stuff like that. But generally, no, I don't like it. There's this one, the only singer I play with right now is a great singer named Camille Thurman. She's a great singer and a great saxophonist. And I played with her really a couple years ago. She did a Burt Bacharach thing, and I did some arranging and toured with her, and she's an artist, and that was great. She hasn't called me in a couple years. Maybe she didn't feel the same way about me. But anyway, so yeah, that's an interesting question. But I was going to say, when I got off the road, when I was in my early 30s, I call it my lost 5 years in New York City. And and I decided, if I keep staying on the road, because I had been on the road for maybe 11 or 12 years, because I was 20 years old. So when I was about 31, 32, I'd been with Nancy Wilson since I was 28, so 5 years or so. And I said, I can't do this. I'm going to end up with Anne Margaret at Las Vegas, or something like that. And I don't see myself that way. But I got off the road. I just took a chance, and to make money, I taught piano lessons, and I did a thing called vocal coaching. And vocal coaching means you get people in New York City who want to be on Broadway. And that's the singers that would come, and they would give you their music, and you got to play with them. And, nice people, but, generally not geniuses, or they'd already be on Broadway. But, some were good. And I did the one experience that really blew my mind was there was a woman named, let's see if I can remember her name. Nobody. Jane Judge. She said, I was an opera singer, but I want to do the young thing, the anger thing, you know. I go, what do you want to do? I'm going to do Carole King. I feel the earth move under my feet. I feel the sky tumbling down, you know. Okay, you know, and I'm just trying to get through the hour to get my $20, you know. And then she said, I love Sting. Every breath you take, every move you make, every breath you take, every move you make, I'll be watching you. I said, no, it's, I'll be watching you. You know, you got to accent that. Yes, I'll be watching you. No, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching. Yeah, okay, that's good, you know. So after that, and I was playing New Year's Eve gigs. And I'll tell you the worst gig I ever played. People say, what's the worst gig you ever played? And I was friends with a great actor, Robert Duvall, because he lived in my neighborhood. I met him through his girlfriend. And we became good friends. And he invited me to a New Year's Eve party. And he had an apartment, a duplex apartment on West 86th Street that it belonged to Enrico Caruso. Gigantic. He had a grand piano. We had great parties. So he invited me to this New Year's Eve party. And all these famous people were there. And I was playing with Pat Metheny and Willie Nelson. And I had to split at 11 o'clock to go do this fucking club date gig. So I take my stuff, my electric piano, my synthesizer, and microphone, and, you know, and I couldn't really sing. I had a little amplifier, and I had a fake book of Stevie Wonder tunes. And I go out to Queens, and I opens a door of a little house, and there's 3 couples. The guys are in leisure suits, you know. Hey, kid, come on in. I go, oh my God, it's the mafia again. So I set up in the living room, and they have TV trays, and they put their food on it, and I'm sitting there in a wool sport coat, sweating, you know, everybody's got a place. You know, get me out of here. I had a little drumulator drum beat. Da 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 da. Don't you worry about the. And I'm just dripping sweat. I'm sounding terrible. I'm just feeling like, okay, this is hell. This is it. This is the end for me. After I took a little break, it goes, hey, kid, you want some scungili? Yeah, thank you. So finally, I got out of there. You know, I made $500, and that was a lot. And I'm sure the club date office made $2,000 or something. And I went home that night, about 2 in the morning, and I was waiting, freezing cold, you know, New York. Got a checkered cab. I put all my stuff in there, and I got out on West End, and I just second, and the wind blew all my stuff over, and our doorman helped me, and I got in, and I just said, I'm never going to play a fucking New Year's Eve gig again if I can help it. If I ever make it, I'm never going to do that. So when I got the Arsenio Hall show, a year or 2 after that, I said, man, I am never playing another New Year's Eve gig, and I have never done it since then. All right, should we play a little bit more? We don't have too much time. All right, play a little song. Well, you know, I was going to play some serious music. I don't know if you guys want to hear it. I could play some not serious music, but I wrote a piece over the pandemic called Pandemia, and it's a suite of 3 sections for jazz piano trio and string quartet. And I could play a little bit of it solo piano, which I thought might be fun to do. It's a little more involving. Let me do that. I would like to do that. I'm going to use the music for this because this is serious. And I brought it. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you that. When I took those 5 years off, I did stand-up. I'll quickly tell you the story. I was doing acting. I also, besides that teaching, I got a job in a restaurant booking the entertainment, because then I got a meal every day, a free meal every day. And I was playing, now here's a singer I love playing with, a guy named Thomas Young. Oh, shit. He's an African-American guy who's in a band called Three Mo Tenors, a group called Three Mo Tenors. He was an amazing opera singer. And he also was a great jazz singer. I mean, his range was unbelievable. He could read, he could sight read any, you know, let's see if I can just get this together. This is like being at my house. I'm digging it, man. He could sight read any 20th century stuff, really hard music, you know. Anyway, so we had a gig at this, there was a restaurant called, that's still there, the West Bank Cafe on 42nd Street and 9th. My friend Steve Olson, who I became friends with then, still owns it. And downstairs they had a basement theater. And so I think Thomas Young just had a gig down there, and a friend of mine had referred me, came over, and we played, and his stuff was pretty hard, but he said, yeah, I like the way you play. So we had a gig for like a Saturday night, a really good, time. We were going to play one set. It was a long set. So he said, it's 2:45 minutes in one, it was like one doing here, like 90 minutes. And he said, I need a break. Could you, I'll show you what I did. He said, could you play something for me, in the break? I said, sure, man, I'll give you a break. So I didn't know what to do. I thought, man, I've been playing just a duo piano, but just piano and voice for 45 minutes. I think the audience has had it. So I thought, I'm going to try this little bit that I do at parties, a little comedy bit. This was before I did any stand-up. And I had an idea that I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a commercial for McDonald's called "You Deserve a Break Today. Come up and get." I think Barry Manilow or somebody wrote. Anyway, I had come up with this bit that you could play it in classical music, So I would say, if the great composers were alive today, well, first of all, they'd be really old, right? They'd be like 300 years old. But then I did it, I'd say, this tune. "You deserve a break today, come on." This is how Bach would do it. That kind of thing that I do Mozart. And then, I don't know, I can't even remember all of them. Satie was good. I go, Eric, it's a 30-second spot. Could you get it going? I did that, and I did this one, Stravinsky. And then I'd end with a big Beethoven thing. So I did that bit, and there were 3 guys from Yale Drama School who were running the show, and one of them became a huge comedian, Louis Black. But in those days, he was writing plays and just emceeing this thing. So he said, hey, man, do you want to start coming down here and doing comedy? I thought, yeah, that sounds like fun. They had a free show at midnight, and you didn't get paid, and people didn't pay to come. So that's when I started doing comedy, and then I started doing the improv, and I did like Victor Borge at jazz. I really used the piano. And that was great for me, because it took me about 2 years not to be nervous. The first 2 years I'd have to have like a shot of martini or something to get in front of people. But it really helped me as a performer to be able to just talk with you guys. Okay, so this is my Pandemia. I'm going to play bits of it. It's in 3 parts. When I composed these pieces first on the piano before I did them with a string quartet, and it was really, I wanted to do big orchestra, but I thought, if I do a string quartet, I can actually get it played, so I've been able to get it performed. The first part was really influenced, and I won't say I ripped it off. You can say I ripped it off. I won't be insulted. The concerto in, the piano concerto in G by Ravel, the second movement, which just killed me. And then the second one is a little more Stravinsky, and the third is by Bach. Now, it's just inspiration. I still made it jazz, but I did totally get inspired by him, because after all those classical lessons, So I'll just play a little bit. That was the Ravel one. This is, truthfully, when I wrote this tune, the tune is, but then the arrangement turned it into Stravinsky. Thank you very much. Thanks to Bill O'Connell, John, Dan, everybody who had us here. I'm going to be signing the book on that note if you happen to buy it. 1 for 20, 2 for 50. And if you can't afford 20, pay 10. If you can't afford, I just want to get the books out. I don't want to have to carry them back, man. So feel free. Okay.